Now when you're factoring and there's a number other than 1 in front of the x squared term, so we have a positive number greater than 1 in front of the x squared term, we're going to use one of two methods. One method we talked about in class. The other method is called the eyeglass method. The eyeglass method circles the a term and the c term, and then they point to whatever they multiply up to. You can see it kind of looks like eyeglasses. So 5 times 2 is 10, so the 10 goes here. Then we want to figure out what two factors of 10 add up to positive 11. So that's positive 10 and positive 1. In order to do this method, we rewrite the ax squared term, we rewrite the c term, and in the middle, instead of writing 11x, we write it with the two factors. So 10x plus 1x gives you 11x. So you rewrite it as 10x plus 1x. Then you're going to factor out the GCF of the first two terms, which is 5x, and you're going to factor out the GCF of the last two terms, which is positive 1. What's inside the binomials, what's left over from each one, should always match up, because then you're going to take this and you're going to factor it out in front so that it's x plus 2, and then what's left over goes in the other binomial, 5x plus 1. So you can see that here. Because of the distributive property, we can do this. So we kind of reverse the distributive property. We took x plus 2 out of this whole polynomial. So x plus 2 goes out of this whole polynomial, and what's left over, the 5x and the plus 1, goes in the other binomial. So let's try another example. The factored form of 3x squared plus 4x minus 15. Circle the 3, circle the 15, and this is a negative 15, so if you want to circle the sign as well. 3 times negative 15 is negative 45. So what two factors of negative 45 add up to positive 4? That's going to be a negative 5 and a positive 9. So again, we rewrite the ax squared term, we rewrite the c term, and then instead of plus 4x, we're going to write plus 9x and minus 5x. Because if you combined those like terms, you'd get that 4x. So we're just rewriting it in a different way. Then we're going to find the GCF of the first two terms and the GCF of the last two terms. The GCF here is 3x. The GCF here, if we just took out a positive 5, then we'd be left with x minus 3. And then they wouldn't be the same as each other. It would be x minus 3 and x plus 3. So instead, if we take out a negative 5, that then leaves us this divided by negative 5 is positive x. This divided by negative 5 is positive 3. So now we can take x plus 3 out and put it in front. And what's left over, the 3x minus 5, goes in the other binomial. Here we have another example. Now in this case, we have 18x squared minus 33x plus 12. You always have to ask yourself first, is there a GCF? Can you first factor out a monomial? Well, the x's you can't because the c term doesn't have an x, so they don't have any variables in common. But you can divide all of those coefficients by 3. So we can first factor out a 3. But then there's still the a term is greater than 1. So we still have to use the eyeglass method. But now the 3 is just going to stay in front this whole time. So 6 times positive 4 is positive 24. What two factors of positive 24 add up to negative 11? Well, that's going to be negative 8 and negative 3. So again, we rewrite the ax squared term. We rewrite the c term. In the middle, we write negative 3x and negative 8x. So we take these two numbers we found and we basically put an x next to them and they're going in the middle. And we're going to take the GCF of the first two and the GCF of the last two. The 3 is going to stay outside. So the GCF of 6x squared and negative 3x is going to be 3x, and that leaves us with 2x minus 1. the GCF of 8x and positive 4, you could say either positive 4 or negative 4. But if we say negative 4, then it will change the signs inside the parentheses of the binomial to make it a positive 2x minus 1. So if you ever end up with the wrong binomial, let's say it's negative 2x plus 1, all you need to do is factor out that negative sign and put it next to your GCF. Then we're going to take the 2x minus 1 and factor it out in front, and what's left over is the 3x minus 4. And the 3 has to stay in front because we did factor that out in the beginning, so we can't just get rid of it. Take a minute to factor the following trinomials completely. First, look for a GCF, then determine whether you need to use the ax squared plus bx plus c method, or if the coefficient is just a 1, then you can just factor regularly by setting up the two binomials. So here we can see our solutions. So factored completely, we factored out a 2 here. Then the coefficient was just a 1, so we can just break it into two binomials with different signs. Bigger number is going to be negative, so that's why the 12 is a negative. What two factors of negative 36 add up to negative 9? Here, we could factor out a negative 2z. The reason I didn't just factor out 2z is because the coefficient here is supposed to be a positive 1, something that's greater than 1. So if you factor out a negative, that will make the a term positive. So factor out a negative 2z to make this a positive 4z squared plus 9z plus 2. If you use the eyeglass method, it would be what two factors of 8 add up to 9, and that would be 8 and 1. So we rewrite the ax squared term, we rewrite the c term, and instead of 9z, we write plus 8z plus 1z. The negative 2z stays out front. The GCF of 4z squared and 8z is 4z, and that leaves us with z plus 2. 1z plus 2, the GCF is 1, but you have to write that plus 1, because when you factor out the z plus 2, you're left with 4z, and you need plus or minus something. So plus 1 is here. The negative 2z stays outside. For this last trinomial, the a term is greater than 1, and there's no GCF that can be factored out right now. So we do the eyeglass method. What two factors of negative 20 add up to negative 7? So we have a positive 8 and a negative 15. We rewrite it as 10x squared minus 15x plus 8x minus 12. The GCF of the first two terms is 5x, and that leaves us with a 2x minus 3. The GCF of the last two terms is positive 4, so that's going to leave us again with a 2x minus 3, and they should always match up, and they do. So we factor out the 2x minus 3. You can see here 2x minus 3, and 5x plus 4 is what's left over. That's what goes in the other binomial.